here we go.
Welcome to the Nine Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the Nine Route Fantasy Football Podcast. Pat and Scott surviving the off season. Obviously, fantasy football is out the door, but we are moving on as we did last year, and we're keeping up with the playoff games and kind of doing a little informational for entertainment purposes only takes on the games as far as the spreads and the lines and who we see winning and why and stuff like that. And again, sometimes those of us that are in the fantasy football community do have a little bit of extra statistical insight based on tracking everybody's yards per catch and average yards per target and points against the defense and stuff like that kind of gives you a little bit more of a grander perspective, shall we say, when it comes to analyzing the game and maybe reading a little deeper through the tea leaves there. Pat, we had 4 games, so we are now down to the final 4 teams. Yeah, what do you think? Where are we standing right now?
Well, I mean, obviously, as football fans and as Philadelphia Eagles fans, pretty happy that the Eagles made it through the divisional round, obviously, and are going to get to host the NFC Championship game this week. I did not want to see San Francisco in the championship game, but you got to beat the best to be the best, right? So I do think San Francisco is going to be a tough challenge for us, but we're going to get into that game a little bit later. We're going to talk about our divisional round picks and how well we did or didn't do this week, and then jump into some of our championship week picks for those 2 games. And it's going to be fun. Definitely going to be an interesting weekend. It's nice that football is just going to be back to one day, though, because having games on Saturday and Sunday it's great. I love it. Don't get me wrong, but I felt like my entire weekend was taken up, watching football. And as much as I love sitting there and drinking beer and not doing anything else, it does kind of, limit what I can get done around the house and, spending time with my kids and my wife and things like that. So nice that my Saturday will be free from football and just get some games on Sunday again this week.
Yeah, that's the important stuff. And obviously, we're going to touch base on what we did last week with our picks and how we made out and how we're looking into this weekend's 2 games on Sunday. And we got something else up our sleeve. Pat, you want to fill them in on, what's going to keep fantasy relevant podcasts like ours moving on?
What can we do to keep people listening? So we decided we talked about this the last couple of weeks. We decided to do a fantasy award presentation, basically, just some fantasy awards for the whole season, guys who were, maybe your fantasy MVP or, and in some cases, maybe your least valuable player. We're going to post all of the fantasy awards nominees for votes. We're going to post them on Twitter as polls. Please go on, follow us, and vote on those categories. You can follow us on Twitter at the 9route1 or at Scott from Delco. A link to our Twitter will also be on our website, which is www.the9routeFFB.com. We will also post the list of fantasy award nominees on there if you'd like to check that out. You won't be able to vote on the website. You got to do that on Twitter. We're trying to keep it centralized so that we can tally all the votes in one specific area. But if you do have any questions about the show or the nominees or anything for us in general, you can email us at the9routeFFB@gmail.com. We are going to reveal the award winners next week on the show, as well as go over our start-sit percentages for the season, see what awards we may have won individually as far as our start-sit picks go, and go from there. But I think we should probably jump right into these awards and kind of explain them to everybody and give them the nominees. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
All right, so we have 9 awards to give out, and we've adequately named them after basically after some famous wide receivers in the NFL, since we are the 9 route. Obviously talks about, that 9 route, that fade route, the deep route. So we wanted to kind of, in keeping with the show's, sort of theme, get these categories named after some prominent wide receivers in NFL history. So our first category is the biggest draft value, and we've aptly named this one the Harold Carmichael Award. Carmichael was drafted in 1971 by the Philadelphia Eagles with their 7th round pick, number 161 overall. Played his entire career with the Philadelphia Eagles except for his final year in 1984, which he played with the Dallas Cowboys. But we Eagles fans, we don't count that towards his career at all. He finished his 14-year career with 590 receptions for just under 9,000 yards and an astonishing 79 touchdowns, and is widely known as one of the best draft values in Eagles history, which is why this award is named after Carmichael. Scott, you want to go ahead and give them the nominees for the biggest draft value?
Sure. Number 4 on our list is Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars, wide receiver. Number 3, another wideout. We're looking at Tyler Lockett from the Seattle Seahawks. Number 2, ironically, would be that Tony Pollard, running back, Dallas Cowboys, who unfortunately a bad leg injury. Hopefully he does get healthy after that game yesterday. And number 1 is Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots, running back. Again, this is just the list. This is, your votes is going to decide who was the biggest draft value.
All right, our next category is Comeback Player of the Year. We've named this one the Steve Smith Sr. Award because in 2004, Steve Smith broke his fibula and missed essentially the entire season. He came back in 2005 and absolutely crushed it, putting up a stat line of 103 receptions for 1,563 yards and 12 touchdowns for the season, earning him the AP Comeback Player of the Year honors. And if that isn't enough to get an award named after you, Smith once again had his season cut short and what seemed to be his career cut short in 2015 by an Achilles injury. Back in 2015, Achilles injuries were kind of like, people just didn't come back from them. But at age 37, somehow Smith rehabbed, came back and played in 2016 and posted a very respectable 70 receptions for 799 yards and 5 touchdowns with the Baltimore Ravens to officially end his career. He did not win AP Comeback Player of the Year that year, but to be able to come back from that injury after coming back from a gruesome injury in 2005, this award definitely had to be named after Steve Smith. So the nominees for that one, Scott?
Our Comeback Player of the Year nominees. We're looking at number 4, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 3, Saquon Barkley, New York Giants. Number 2, Christian McCaffrey, formerly of Carolina, now of San Francisco. And our number 1 slot is Cam Akers. These are all running backs. Cam Akers of the Los Angeles Rams. So again, good to see them back on the field, and they were all solid contributors for everyone who had them on their team and on their roster this year.
Yeah, Akers fell off in the beginning, but he made another comeback at the end of the season and looked pretty good. So it's going to be interesting to see who wins that one. All right, our next category is the Unsung Hero Award. This is going to be named after Jimmy Smith. Smith has basically been, if you follow football, has been number 1 on many pundits' lists for Hall of Fame recognition that he has not yet received. In 11 NFL seasons, Smith has amassed 862 receptions for 12,287 yards and 67 touchdowns, numbers that far surpass some of those held by already inducted Hall of Fame wide receivers. A lot of people still believe that Jimmy Smith has kind of been snubbed and was an unsung hero for an expansion team that went to the AFC Championship game in its second season. So the nominees for that award, Scott?
So we're looking at our Jimmy Smith Unsung Hero Award for your fantasy football season. Number 4, Devonta Smith, wide receiver, Philadelphia Eagles. Number 3, showing up again, is that Tony Pollard, running back, Dallas Cowboys. Number 2, Josh Jacobs, running back, Las Vegas Raiders. And number 1 unsung hero on our list here is Jamal Williams, running back, Detroit Lions.
The next category is our Rookie of the Year award. We've named this one after Randy Moss. Moss could probably fit in many of these categories, but his rookie season was one for the ages. Back in 1998, Moss started only 11 games, but finished third overall in receiving yards with 1,313 receiving yards, and first in touchdowns with 17 amongst all wide receivers, earning him Offensive Rookie of the Year honors. The nominees for the Rookie of the Year.
Our Randy Moss Award Rookie of the Year nominees. Number 4, Drake London, wide receiver, Atlanta Falcons. Number 3, Garrett Wilson, wide receiver, New York Jets. Number 2, Chris Olave, wide receiver, New Orleans Saints. And number 1, Kenneth Walker III, running back, Seattle Seahawks.
The next award, we got a bunch of good awards. Sometimes, people tend to let you down a little bit as well. So got to make sure that in order to celebrate the good, we also have to, remember the bad. So this next category is going to be our biggest playoff letdown award. We've named this one after Kevin Dyson. Although he had a great career and was a wonderful wide receiver, he will always be remembered by many of us as the wide receiver that came up just a few feet short of the goal line in Super Bowl 34, allowing the Rams to go on and win that Super Bowl over the Tennessee Titans. So our nominees for the Kevin Dyson Award.
For the Kevin Dyson Award for biggest playoff letdown, number 4, Mark Andrews, tight end, Baltimore Ravens. Number 3, Stephon Diggs, wide receiver, Buffalo Bills. Number 2, DK Metcalf, wide receiver, Seattle Seahawks. And number 1, Ramondre Stevenson, running back, New England Patriots.
All right, our next award is going to be for the biggest playoff boom. We have aptly named this award after Julian Edelman. Edelman's regular season career numbers are fairly average overall, but he ranks in the top 5 in most playoff receiving categories, including receptions with 118, yards with 1,442, 100-yard games with 6, and is also top 5 in Super Bowl history in receptions with 24 and yards with 337, and is one of just 7 wide receivers to win a Super Bowl MVP award.
The nominees for biggest playoff boom, Julian Edelman Award. Number 4, George Kittle, tight end, San Francisco 49ers. Number 3, Devonta Smith, wide receiver, Philadelphia Eagles. Number 2, CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver, Dallas Cowboys. Number 1, Jerick McKinnon, running back, Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, and those are just taking into account the stats from the fantasy playoffs, which was week 15 through, we went through week 18 for our league because our league of record does play 18 weeks. But those were the guys that really showed out the last 4 weeks of the season and helped a lot of people win fantasy championships. Our next award is our biggest bust award. We've named this one after Charles Rogers. Most of you were probably like, who the heck is Charles Rogers? Charles Rogers was picked 2nd overall back in 2003 by the Detroit Lions. Some personal trouble and some unfortunate addiction to painkillers had him out of the NFL just 2 years later, never to return. And I actually heard that he's a mechanic somewhere, like in Cleveland or Cincinnati or something like that, just working at like an auto shop. So unfortunately for Charles Rogers, his career didn't last very long. He was a major bust from the 2003 NFL draft. Our biggest bust nominees this year are...
Nominees for biggest bust, Charles Rogers Award. Oh, God. Number 4, Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, that one hurts.
Yeah, it's very personal. Kyle Pitts, tight end, Atlanta Falcons. Number 3, Mike Gesicki, tight end, Miami Dolphins. Number 2, Pat, this is your guy, Allen Robinson, wide receiver, Los Angeles Rams. And number 1, Justin Herbert, quarterback, Los Angeles Chargers.
2 LA guys.
Yeah, that whole town stunk.
All right, the next award is our undrafted MVP. We call this the Rod Smith Award. Rod Smith obviously went undrafted in 1994, eventually signed with the Denver Broncos and played his first game with Denver in 1995. After a long career, he eventually finished with 849 receptions, 11,389 yards, and 68 touchdowns. He became a Hall of Fame finalist in 2015. He has not yet been inducted into the Hall of Fame, but every year he gets revoted on, and I think his year is coming. He definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame as an undrafted player. Let's hear the nominees for the Rod Smith Award.
Our nominees for undrafted MVP, Rod Smith Award. Number 4, Evan Engram, tight end, Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 3, Zay Jones, wide receiver, Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 2, Jerick McKinnon, running back, Kansas City Chiefs. And number 1, Geno Smith, quarterback, Seattle Seahawks.
All right, and our final award, the coup de grace, so to speak, of our fantasy awards, the MVP award. We've named this one, obviously, after Jerry Rice. I don't think an explanation is needed for this one. Scott, go ahead and give them the nominees for fantasy MVP.
MVP, Jerry Rice Award. Number 4, Travis Kelce, tight end, Kansas City Chiefs. Number 3, Justin Jefferson, wide receiver, Minnesota Vikings. Number 2, Austin Eckler, running back, Los Angeles Chargers. And number 1, Patrick Mahomes, quarterback, Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, we could have had a lot of people in that fantasy MVP category. There's a lot of players that, really based on their draft value and, where you may have picked them and stuff like that, a lot of guys could have been your MVP, but we kind of just went with the stalwarts at each position. And interesting to find out who the MVP is going to be. Scott and I will also vote on these and make our picks. And when we come back next week to deliver the winners, we'll let you know who we picked and why.
Yeah, folks. Again, we look forward to watching everybody out there contribute, vote, get out and vote. You got to vote. It's your patriotic duty here at the 9 Route. So again, we look forward to that, and yeah, we'll follow up with everybody and explain the winners. Moving on, I think we're ready to go back into our divisional round of picks from last week. Obviously, there were a few games in there. It looks like I didn't do too bad this week. Pat finished with a 6-6 record in the divisional round, while I cruised to a 9-3 record in the divisional round. So after 2 weeks, wild card and divisional, Pat is 20-10 with his picks. I am 17-13, so I am knocking on the door, buddy. I'm coming through after this week. We'll see.
Yeah, I didn't think you'd be making it close after that wild card round, but you cleaned up, got 2 games, all the way right, everything spread, money line, all that good stuff. So definitely killed it this week. Yeah, and like I said, after our talk last week, you kind of got me, back in the game, so to speak. So both personally and professionally, not too bad with picks, and I know you are involved on that too. So I guess we'll start with the first game. That was the Kansas City Chiefs against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Turns out Kansas City was just too much for Jacksonville, although a lot of things did happen. There were some missed opportunities for Jacksonville in the game, and probably one of the biggest notes coming out of the game is the high ankle sprain of Pat Mahomes that could have an effect on this week's game against Cincinnati. Isaiah Pacheco had 12 carries for 95 yards. Travis Kelce had a game that you really wish you had him for during the regular season at some point. He had how many catches was it, Pat? 14, almost set the playoff record for catches in a game. He did set the tight end, the record for tight end catches in a game, but almost set the playoff record for catches in the game, or tied it, I should say. That was 15, but he ended up with 14 for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Travis Kelce definitely showed why he is tight end 1 in the NFL this week.
Crazy. Kadarius Toney, the newer acquisition this season in Kansas City, he had 7 targets. He was second on the team. When it comes to Jacksonville, basically they're 2 skill guys that you would expect were involved. Travis Etienne, 10 carries, 62 yards, and a touchdown. Christian Kirk, who did get hurt in the game, I did remember seeing a little blurb. I don't think he returned. It was 7 catches on 14 targets for 52 yards and a touchdown. And like we said, the high ankle sprain to Pat Mahomes, you definitely saw him hopping. He was not comfortable, and obviously maybe with some time off to get some healing done. But going up this week in that Cincinnati matchup, we'll touch on if that's going to have an effect on that game. Pat, what was the nightcap on Saturday?
Oh, you forgot that quickly, huh? That was the New York Giants traveling to Philadelphia to get smacked on the butt and sent home. The Philadelphia Eagles won that game 38-7. Scott, you called this one, man. This was an Eagles blowout. I thought the Giants, coming off of some momentum here, would keep this game close. And, we saw their defense play fairly well in Week 18 against the Philadelphia Eagles. They didn't win the game, obviously, but they held them to, under 30 points. And I thought, well, if they could do that without their offensive players on the field, maybe them sustaining some offensive drives could potentially keep this game a little bit closer. But the Eagles, with that week of rest, they were hungry and they came out and they just absolutely destroyed it. Jalen Hurts ended the game 16 for 24, 154 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air. Also added 9 rushes for 34 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Kenneth Gainwell ended up having a big game there at the end. Didn't get a whole lot of carries early, but took advantage of his carries late when that game was pretty much put away. Had 12 rushes for 112 yards and a touchdown. And, of course, the giant killer, Boston Scott, scored another touchdown. He now has 11 touchdowns in 9 career games versus the Giants. He only has 8 touchdowns in the other 52 games he's played in his career. So Boston Scott loves seeing those New York Giants on the other side of the football. As far as the Giants go, not a whole bunch of offensive production. Richie
Danny
James
Dimes doing Danny Dimes things. Yes, sir.
That's why I call him Danny Nichols, baby.
Mm-hmm.
Richie James did have I guess the most sort of standout game for the Giants. 10 targets, 7 catches, 51 yards, no touchdowns. But it was just a good old-fashioned whooping that the Eagles gave the Giants. So definitely made me a little bit more confident in Philadelphia's prospects going into next week. But we'll get into that game in a little bit. You want to take the next one?
Absolutely. 2 matchups on Sunday, first of which was the Cincinnati Bengals traveling to Buffalo. Obviously, the Damar Hamlin game, fresh in everybody's mind from that Monday night matchup that happened in Cincinnati. These 2 teams finally got a chance to get it on. And, I kind of had a feeling that Cincinnati seems like a hotter team, a bit of the better team. And Buffalo kind of looked like they were leaking oil with that tough game they had against Miami. And Cincinnati, the snow, it gave it that beautiful atmosphere that you want to see in playoff football in January and maybe early February. I mean, Cincinnati really just owned them the whole game, and they just never looked like they really were going to come back and do anything to be competitive at any point. So Cincinnati is looking like a tough team. It was a battle of 2 titans of quarterbacks in the NFL, both fantasy and reality. Joe Burrow, 23 of 36, 242 and 2 touchdowns. There was one that was called back, questionable whether he had possession with Jamar Chase. And again, Chase and he, they just have that connection. Jamar Chase, 5 catches on 8 targets, 61 yards and a touchdown. And again, that could have been one more if they had ruled differently.
Wish it was.
Yeah,
I lost my parlay on 8 Joe Burrow passing yards. That was I think it was a 10 or 11 yard touchdown.
Yeah.
Got taken off the board.
Which when, watching the replay, that's that whole, it's 2023 and they still haven't figured out what the hell a catch is. And I don't understand it. It's like, if you jump over the pile and you break the plane of the goal line, even if they knock the ball out, you had the possession and it's a touchdown. Versus the guy had the ball, Jamar Chase, touches with both feet, and then as he's going out, he loses control of the ball. That's not a touchdown.
But it never hits the ground.
Exactly.
It lands in his lap, and he just, I don't know what's a catch anymore. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Nope. Controlling the game as they did on both sides, of the ball. But The line of scrimmage was it. Joe Mixon, 20 carries, 105 yards, and a touchdown. That offensive line, it's been banged up. That was a big thing, missing 3 of their starters with injury, and they still really controlled it. Not a great day for Josh Allen. 25 of 42, 265 and a pick. Stephon Diggs, and he seemed out of sorts. They were having some friendly chatter on the sidelines out of frustration. Yeah, maybe not anymore, but 10 targets. He only had 4 catches for 35 yards, no touchdowns. Something's wrong in Buffalo. I think that everybody kind of sees that, the way they finished out the season. Maybe that Damar Hamlin thing had more of an effect than we know of in the locker room, amongst other things. But like we said, talking about our awards, that Stephon Diggs was a bit of a playoff letdown. And Josh Allen, he puts up stats, and everybody says, Buffalo is atop this defense and atop this offense. If you go back and look at some of the teams they played, they looked well, but I don't know. I feel like maybe that team is maybe having to make a big move to shake some things up. Maybe even not with the coach, but maybe with some of the players on that team. I think they thought they were going to get something that they earned without earning it. And you don't do that in the NFL. And for Cincinnati to be 1 game away from back in the Super Bowl as, the Super Bowl loser, kudos to them. And they have a good matchup coming up this week with Kansas City.
We're going to start calling him January Joe. That Joe Burrow has just absolutely killed it in the playoffs. He's his record now is 5-1 in the playoffs. He hasn't lost a game in January. The only playoff loss was obviously the Super Bowl last year, but that was in February. So 5-0 in the month of January in just 2 seasons. He's definitely, when he said his window is his entire career, he was not kidding. That guy comes to play in the playoffs, and he's a sight to watch, man. He was like a surgeon in that game. It was really fun to watch him operate. The nightcap on Sunday was the Dallas Cowboys at the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners held on to this one 19-12 in one of those weird, I got these 2 numbers in my block pool. I might as well just throw them away because it's never going to end with a 9 and a 2. And what do you know? If there was a block pool for this game, some lucky winner there with some strange numbers. But in this one, Christian McCaffrey ended up going 10 for 35 on the ground with that 1 touchdown, the only one that San Francisco scored. Also added 6 catches on 8 targets for 22 yards through the air. George Kittle, 5 catches on 5 targets for 95, including that bobbling circus catch that he made in the fourth quarter, and really helped to seal that win for the 49ers. Ever since Brock Purdy has become the quarterback there, man, George Kittle is just, he's kind of become the man there. Purdy just tends to look for him when things get hectic in the pocket, and Kittle always delivers. The Dallas Cowboys top performers, CeeDee Lamb, 10 catches for 117 yards on 13 targets. He had probably the only real good game for the Dallas Cowboys. Dak Prescott, unfortunately, 23 of 37 for just 208 yards. Did throw that 1 touchdown in the beginning of the game to Dalton Schultz, but also added 2 picks. And for me in this one, I think the San Francisco defense really showed that they can stop a good offense, because I do think, Dallas is a pretty good offense in the league. But they also showed that they can be stopped by a good defense. And when I was saying to you earlier about my prospects thinking about Philadelphia moving forward, the Niners offense had been moving the ball pretty easily through the last 8 weeks or so, since Brock Purdy's been there. And this was the first game that they ran into any real, struggle offensively. And the Dallas defense did a pretty good job. It's unfortunately, their offense could not keep up. 12 points is not enough to win a playoff game. But, I think that Dallas is in a spot now where I don't know if they can continue moving forward with Dak Prescott as their quarterback. I mean, he's under contract, so it's going to be difficult. He's getting a ton of money, but I mean, he just does not seem like he shows up in these big games. He lost the playoff game to the 49ers last year, loses another one this year, 2 games where, the offense just, wasn't able to move the ball. Now, obviously the Tony Pollard injury probably had something to do with that, as he's one of their more dynamic players, but I don't know, man. If I'm the Cowboys, I'm thinking that when this contract runs out, that I may be in the market for a new quarterback. It just doesn't seem like as good of a guy as Dak Prescott seems like he is. Just doesn't seem like the type of quarterback that can get it done in the clutch.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it. Yeah, no, I 100%.
Not a sponsor of the show, by the way.
Yeah, not yet, but please, Ronald, if you're listening, come on, buddy. We need Grimace. We need the whole gang. But no, all kidding aside, yeah, like obviously we have our finger on the pulse of this game a little more than any of the others in the playoffs because we want to see who we're going to play. And watching, did get to catch a lot of it, as I was making dinner on my phone, because that's what you do nowadays. Prescott, lost the game for him, obviously with 2 interceptions that goes a different way. They do different things. It's Mike McCarthy. It's Jerry Jones. It's that whole organization that just can't get out of their own way and still live in the past and want to talk about, how we're getting better. And they do. And, the Pollard injury probably did have a strong factor to slow that offense down because as we talked about, again, with our award thing and looking, at that, he's the scariest player almost on that team because he can beat you in 2 different ways. Yeah, CeeDee Lamb's the best fantasy guy, and Dalton Schultz is not too much of a slouch too as a tight end. He's definitely come around in the last couple of years, but we know Ezekiel Elliott's toast, and it just is what it is. But that quarterback being that guy where they did everything wrong. They got out of their own rhythm, as you noticed when they did run the football a little bit. They kind of had the Niners, keeping them honest. But when you throw 37 times in a game where it's basically a 1-score game. Meanwhile, San Francisco keeps Brock Purdy under 30 attempts. He's doing everything right. They're not overworking him. And I mean, both quarterbacks face pressure, obviously to the point where Prescott, if he's playing against straight zone, that's one thing. But I know they talk about the Niners play like a quarter zone and it's not really man, it's more matchup type stuff. They really just took them out of their own game really quick. You didn't kick the field goal because you were scared and you end up injuring your running back on that, in that exchange with that whole thing. And he missed the extra point. There's 4 points that you could have had. Suddenly you're talking about a field goal game, 16-19. Obviously, again, maybe one of those picks doesn't happen. Dallas, pound for pound, shoulda, woulda, coulda been the better team in the game. But yes, it was, poor coaching and game plan and philosophy. And the Niners are a very stout team especially on defense, but their offense has a lot of weapons too. And I'm looking forward to this Sunday night here in Philly, Pat.
Yeah. I mean, I was saying before the game to my wife, I would really, it's very hard for me to ever root for the Cowboys. But I was really pulling for them in this one because I wanted, not only did I not want to play San Francisco, but I also really wanted to beat Dallas in an NFC Championship game because I feel like it would have been that much sweeter. But alas, we don't get that matchup. We get San Francisco, which what are you going to do, right? The number 1 and number 2 seeds make it all the way to the championship game. That's kind of what you want. You want the best 2 teams playing in the championship games, and wouldn't hate seeing a Philadelphia Kansas City Super Bowl either. But we're going to jump into those games now and talk about our picks for the championship weekend. The first game on Sunday is going to be the San Francisco 49ers at those Philadelphia Eagles, Sunday, 3:00. As the line opened, it was San Francisco plus 2.5, and the over-under was 45.5. I'll just jump right into this one since I'm already talking. And while I do think that this is going to be an absolutely phenomenal game, like I said, this isn't really the matchup that I wanted to see as an Eagles fan. The 49ers defense is probably the best in the NFL, and they're currently on a 12-game winning streak. They haven't lost a single game since Christian McCaffrey was named the starter. If you remember, he came like middle of the week, didn't technically start that first game. They lost that game, but then they haven't lost a game since. They're also 8-0 with Brock Purdy at quarterback. I will say that last week versus Dallas, Purdy looked more like a rookie than I've seen in his previous 7 starts. Dallas's defensive line pressure was kind of a key to, keeping the San Francisco offense to just 1 touchdown and only 19 total points. And I think that this is really good news for the Eagles, as they were the best team in the league at sacking the quarterback this season with 70 sacks in the regular season. That's not including the playoffs, obviously. And it wasn't just one guy for Philadelphia. They set an NFL record this season by having 4 players with double-digit sacks in the regular season. And ultimately, I think this is where the game is going to be won or lost. Both teams have playmakers. Both teams can run and pass the ball effectively. Both teams are pretty solid in special teams. The difference in this game will be the offensive and the defensive lines. And while I do believe that Nick Bosa is probably the best player on either team's defense, the Eagles' offensive line, now that Lane Johnson is back and close to 100%, is the best offensive line in the NFL. And I believe will help the Eagles win a close game this weekend and carry them to their second Super Bowl appearance in 5 years. So for this game, I am taking the Philadelphia Eagles, taking them against the spread minus the 2.5 and on the money line. And I'm going to say under because, like I said, I do think the defensive lines are going to, cause both offenses to struggle to move the ball a little bit. There's going to be some sacks. There's going to be some pressures and throwaways and things like that are going to keep this score a little bit low. I'm not usually one for calling game scores, but I'm going to go ahead and say 24-20 Eagles in this one.
All right, Pat. Yeah, I think we're kind of in the same ballpark with this. Yeah, this game to me it's actually everything I did want. I did want San Francisco because everybody has them listed as that team. They're pretty much penciled in, albeit, I know Vegas changes lines and stuff like that. I was actually looking before I think the playoff weekend started that the Eagles were actually the favorite to win the conference, but the Niners were the better favorite to win the Super Bowl. So I don't know how that factors in, and that's not a typo. That was on like a FanDuel website when I was actually looking at the playoff odds. So it's like, okay, that's interesting, to say the least. Looking at a lot of the stats for this, it's going to be, yes, the matchup of the two best teams in the conference. And pound for pound, to me, this is a borderline Super Bowl matchup itself. The Eagles have to worry, to me, about one player in particular. If they can isolate this person, then they shouldn't lose the game. It's Brandon Ayuk. We talked about people that have improved from last year and different things like that. He was a guy that was in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse last year. This year, he goes off for the tune of 78 catches for over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. He was a top 15 wide receiver in fantasy football compared to 35th in 2021. Yeah, like that's the kind of guy that is somebody who, you're looking at McCaffrey, you're looking at Debo, Kittle. Oh my God, who's going to get the ball? And I think Dallas was able to neutralize him a lot yesterday, and that's what made it such a close game because he doesn't burn you with big plays, but he does average 8 yards a target, and that's something that's going to factor into him just helping to move the chains. Their entire team does that. They dink and dunk to an extent. They don't make massively big plays. They do break a few, and if they do, it's usually out of the backfield, some type of option. They run a lot of play action. They don't do the RPO with Purdy. You saw him look mortal yesterday because he was getting pressured a lot. Dallas didn't get to him all the time. Big stat for me that jumps out is red zone, 3rd and 4th down conversions and red zone conversions. When you look back and you see where the Eagles are compared to the San Francisco 49ers, the Eagles convert, and again, you may or may not believe it. The Eagles convert to the tune of the 3rd best red zone touchdown percentage in the league at almost 68%. And you say, well, San Francisco's defense is just as good. Actually, they're not. They're about 20th in stopping teams in the red zone from scoring a touchdown at only 57%. So again, you have to make mistakes against them. They need turnovers, and this team doesn't do that often. As long as they play mistake-free football, you're going to see running on both sides to try to wear those defenses down because you're looking at the number 1 and number 2 defenses in the league. That being said, it's all out the window. It's Philadelphia. It's Philadelphia. It's Philadelphia. I do like Philadelphia. I like the spread. I like the under. And I think it is going to be a little bit of a, like you say, maybe a low scoring game. I think it's going to be somewhere around a 23-10 Philadelphia Eagles final, and they will go to the Super Bowl to play the winner of the next game, which we'll talk about now.
Oh, I thought you were going to give your pick away there.
Save it for the best for last.
I think that this game is the AFC game is also going to be a barn burner. I think this is going to be a great game. 6:30 kickoff here on the East Coast. Cincinnati at Kansas City. This line opens Cincinnati +1. I think by the time this gets to kickoff, it may flip-flop. It may be Kansas City +1 or a pick 'em. The way Cincinnati played last week, I can't imagine them not being I can't imagine them being an underdog for long. I think a lot of money is going to roll in on them. The over-under of this one started at 47.5. I said at the beginning of our playoff picks, a couple weeks ago, that I wasn't going to sleep on Cincinnati again this year. And what did I do? I slept on them last week against the Bills. I really thought that the Bills were a team of destiny this year after the way that last year ended. I mean, the NFL made the rule change in the playoffs specifically because of the way the Bills and Chiefs game ended. And I just felt like this was their year. Well, I'm not going to make that same mistake again this week. The Bengals dominated, what I believe is one of the best teams in the NFL for pretty much 4 quarters this past week. And it wasn't just, Burrow and Chase, putting massive points on the board. Their defense played great, not just in this game, but in their other playoff game against Baltimore. And I think that's going to be the difference in this one. Both of these offenses are incredibly tough to stop when they're firing on all cylinders, but the Bengals have shown up on the defensive side of the ball in impressive fashion so far in the playoffs, and I think they will again this week versus Kansas City. And with Mahomes playing on a high ankle sprain, there's just that much more of a slight edge for Cincinnati. Not that Mahomes is, like a Josh Allen where he gets out and like runs for, 40, 50, 60 yards a game, but he does get outside of the pocket, and that's, he makes a lot of those unscripted plays and that kind of scramble. Everybody's seen the highlights, the underhand tosses and the sidearm tosses and all the crazy, Mahomes magic stuff that he does. But with that little bit of a hitch in his giddy up, I think the Bengals defensive line will have a little bit easier time keeping him in the pocket, where he's still really good. But again, that's not where that Mahomes magic comes from. So I like Cincinnati in this one. I'm going to take Cincinnati 27-24. So give me Cincinnati +1 as of right now, and the over in this one.
Yeah, looks like we're looking at the same Super Bowl, Pat. We talked about the games that led to this and how Cincinnati did look more dominant against Buffalo, and again, you were higher on Buffalo. I kind of didn't see that. I felt like Cincinnati looked maybe a little more destined in a certain way. Didn't expect it to be quite that much of a difference, though, with the score. The Mahomes thing is going to be a factor. I don't care what you say. There's no way you're going to come back after 1 week and be 100%. Nobody is at this time of year. But if we remember back to their second Super Bowl in a row, Kansas City Chiefs went up against Tampa Bay, and he was playing on a bad leg then. He lost his mobility. Tampa Bay ate him up, and they won that Super Bowl easily against a team that everybody expected to just go out there and blow them away, even though Brady was there and everything else. Burrow right now, again, he looks like that guy. The two quarterbacks that for me right now, and it's no slight on Mahomes and it's no slight on the kid Purdy, he looks pretty good, but the two quarterbacks right now that to me look like they are out for blood are Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow has that chip on his shoulder from losing last year. Jalen Hurts has always been underestimated, from college days and different benchings that happened and stuff like that. I actually saw the film, the Nick Sirianni giving him the extra day off this week after the win, and everybody cheered, and Jalen Hurts just looked like he wanted to kill somebody because he's just that determined.
I'll be at the office. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, he did. Even last week, they gave him the extra day off, and he went in to watch film. But getting back to Cincinnati, I feel like they are the better team at this time. I feel like Kansas City's defense just gives up too many points. They're kind of like the Minnesota Vikings light. The problem is that they just have a little bit better on offense, and you have the coaching factor too with Andy Reid. Remember last year where they kind of ate them up in the playoffs and won that game in overtime. They won earlier this year, 27-24. I think it's going to be a little bit more of Cincinnati just taking the game a little bit too far for them. But the score will be nearby. I do like Cincinnati all the way, money line spread, and I like the over. I think Cincinnati wins 28-20, and I think you're going to see Joe Burrow and Jalen Hurts. It'll be the Eagles and the Bengals in the Super Bowl, and I'll just throw it out there right now that the Eagles will probably be a 5.5-point favorite with an over-under of, I don't know, maybe 49. That's my call right now.
5.5, really?
Yep.
That's a big spread for the Super Bowl.
Hey.
I'm not getting into calling the spreads yet because this game, let's make sure that we beat San Francisco before I start calling lines for the Super Bowl. But if they ended up being, if Cincinnati makes it, I can't see them being more than 2 points underdog to either team, to San Francisco or Philadelphia. Personally, that's just my opinion. But yeah, I mean, let's get through this one before we start worrying about who we're playing in the Super Bowl. I think that we're in for a great weekend, a great Sunday of football. I mean, these obviously are, I think everybody sort of outside of Cincinnati wanted to see Buffalo, Kansas City rematch. Those two obviously being the top two seeds, which Cincinnati, I guess, can technically claim some portion of that top 2 seed. They could have been the number 2 seed had they beat Buffalo in that game that got canceled, and they looked really good in that game. So that's not a stretch, and they just obviously beat them this week. So not a stretch at all. But, I think that these number 1 seeds advancing and, the 2 and 3 seed, and like I said, Cincinnati could very easily be the 2 in the AFC. I think we've got 2 really, really good games, and it's going to be really exciting football to watch this week, especially for us as Eagles fans, obviously. But even if it wasn't, I would still be glued to the TV for these ones, because these are definitely some, as you said earlier, some Titans matching up in the playoffs this year. All right, I think that is going to do it for the show. Before we go, we'd like to thank Mickey's Protocol Pub in Tuckerton, New Jersey for partnering with the show. If you are looking for a great place to watch these championship games on Sunday, Mickey's is it. Great food, drink specials, and all the football you can handle. Mickey's Pub, 327 East Main Street in Tuckerton, New Jersey, where friends and family meet. Folks, don't forget to follow us on Twitter so that you can vote on our fantasy awards. By the time you hear this episode, those will be up on Twitter. You can check out. We'll pin them to the page, the at the 9 Route 1. I'll pin them there so that as soon as you go on, you can go ahead and check out, where the votes are and vote for your favorite fantasy MVP and the other awards that we're giving out. Scott, do you have anything to add before we jump out of here for the day?
Go Birds! Peace.